In September of 2017, a YouTube video was published by the name of Açoriano Legendado, literally subtitled Azorean, that depicted a guy from São Miguel, one of the Azorean islands off the west coast of Portugal, just talking.
Mais para fora, eles não quiserem pensarem que é muito torto e vão gastar muito dinheiro. E eles fizerem essa. E a gente no tempo, a gente aguentamos essa, com os que fazem ainda mais para a terra.
The video received over 380,000 views, with commenters saying stuff like, "Whoever captioned this man speaking deserves a Nobel Prize, without subtitles it's impossible," etc. When I first saw this video I was fascinated, and I knew I had to look into it more. What makes Azorean Portuguese so distinct? We'll first talk about what the Azores are, then look at some more videos of Azorean speakers, and finally map out the phonological properties of Azorean varieties in comparison to other Portuguese varieties. So, the Azores, officially the Autonomous Region of the Azores, Região Autónoma dos Açores, is an autonomous region of Portugal comprising 9 volcanic islands about 1,400 kilometers west of Lisbon in the North Atlantic Ocean. Azoreans, os Açorianos, are known for the phonological divergence of their Portuguese, which is reasonable given the isolation of the islands from mainland Portugal. In fact, the Azores were purportedly uninhabited before being colonized by the Portuguese in 1439. I say purportedly, since records say that the first Europeans to arrive on the island were Portuguese explorers in 1427, but modern mouse DNA accounts suggest that the archipelago was perhaps first discovered by Vikings, so make of that what you will. Point is, Azoreans' speech had over 600 years to change, and indeed it did. It's worth noting that Azorean Portuguese isn't actually one dialect. Each island has its own variety and little nuances, so I'll be going over sound changes and how they occur in each island with some rough geographical details. It won't be 100% accurate, but it'll reflect the overall tendencies of the regions. As for sources, I'll be combining YouTube videos of speakers in day-to-day contexts with the ALEAS, the Ethno-Linguistic Atlas of the Azores, or Atlas Linguístico-Etnográfico dos Açores. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's first start with the vowels. One of the first properties that stuck out to me was vowel fronting, which predominantly happens in São Miguel, a common theme of this episode. For some reason, São Miguel seems to be one of the most phonologically divergent islands in many aspects, which may be why this guy talking got so viral. From what I can tell, he's from Rabo de Peixe, a civil parish in the municipality of Ribeira Grande in São Miguel. By the way, for context, I'm going to be pronouncing every word I'm not using as an example of Azorean phonology in a Brazilian accent, since that's just what's more familiar to me. Anyway, basically, the diphthongs oi and o in São Miguel both became For example, the word coisa, meaning thing, would be pronounced coisa, and couve, meaning cabbage, would be couve in the fronting areas of São Miguel. Oi becoming makes sense through the influence of e being a front vowel like but o becoming is a little less apparent, though something similar seems to have happened in Icelandic as another example, where the diphthong au is now pronounced like in Löwe, so I guess it can happen. Some other regions in São Miguel and Santa Maria turn the o diphthong into oi, so coive, while in some western islands like Terceira, the diphthong is generally preserved as o. Some central islands like Faial and Pico, however, might reduce the diphthong into o or o, giving cov or cov, which is really interesting. Stressed u also sometimes gets fronted, which is a super complex phenomenon. There's literally a 17-page paper I found talking about just that one phenomenon in the Journal of Portuguese Linguistics. This fronting predominantly happens in São Miguel, so instead of saying something like unha, you might hear unha. The basic idea is that it usually fronts when u is in a stressed syllable, so like the example with unha, and also with words like lula, though it can happen in other contexts that I won't really get into the specifics of, but I posted a link to the paper in the description if you're interested. Voiceless and elided vowels. In many Portuguese varieties, the vowels e and o at the end of words are often heard as weaker than their stressed counterparts. In Brazilian Portuguese, they're raised to e and u, like in gente and sinto, and in many European varieties they're analyzed as voiceless vowels that are sometimes dropped, but other times reappear in very careful speech. In the Azores, this seems to be a common feature shared by most speakers on every island, such that a word like leite is pronounced leite or late. Ah. The quality of ah is a subtle change, but I wanted to mention it anyway because I really like how it sounds. Basically, unstressed ah remains something like while its stressed counterpart is often backed to like in atrapalhar. Diphthongs. There's also some funny diphthongs I wanted to briefly mention to see if anyone in the comments could provide any insight as to their occurrence, because I haven't been able to fully understand them, but wanted to bring them up anyways because I, again, thought they sounded cool. My favorite example is how lots of people pronounce this word like this. Let me know what you guys think. As another brief little thing, I noticed some speakers monophlongize ow to ah. Now let's talk consonants. Something I found really interesting is that the speaker in the famous clip pronounces mesmo as mum. While it's true he was speaking quite quickly in the phrase, this would be incredibly exciting since it's exactly what happened in French, where the cognative mesmo, ultimately coming from Latin metipsimus, is mem with the s elided. This could point at more consonant reduction in the future in these places. As with most European varieties of Portuguese, we still have D being pronounced as a dental fricative, sometimes even a little bit retracted, and long R is often realized as a uvular trill, but can also be lowered to an approximant and even enter the pharyngeal area as a result, since this part of the throat is not really discretely defined. At the end of words, this R is usually lost, which is a shared trait between it and other Brazilian varieties, for example. Outside of those notes, there's really not much else I've particularly noticed about the consonants of these varieties, but let me know anything you guys have found in the comments. So, how did this happen? I've heard that when the Azores were first being colonized, lots of Flemish soldiers were sent around the islands, especially in São Miguel, the very island we've seen manifesting some of the more radical characteristics of the islands. We can see how that would make sense. Noticing how different the amount of consonant shifts versus vowel shifts is, I think it's safe to assume a lot of the Azorean vowels are really unstable at the moment, and we could be seeing something like what happened to English at the time of the Great Vowel Shift. There's also some slight little grammatical and lexical variations I've noticed in the Azorean media I've consumed. In Portuguese, an alternative way of saying nós, meaning we, is a gente, which is most commonly conjugated in the third person singular in European and Brazilian varieties, but I often see it being conjugated in the first person plural in the Azores, like a gente somos instead of a gente tá. I also notice there's sometimes different ways of pluralizing nouns. In the Northwestern Islands, there's a tendency, according to the Aléas, to pluralize pão as pães, but in the Southeast Islands, it can be pães or pães. There's also a bunch of expressions unique to the Azores, which you can learn about in this video, since that goes way in depth into some of them. That's about it for today's video. I had a lot of fun making this. I mean, it literally made me want to learn Portuguese, so let's see how that goes. I've been really busy because of college, now that I'm living in my own apartment and doing everything myself. I mean, I'm sure you guys can understand. As always, I read all my comments, so make sure to leave some down below, and yeah. Also, I've been considering streaming either on YouTube or Twitch lately, and I'll make a post about it too, so I wanted to know if you guys, one, would be interested in that, and two, what you guys would like to potentially see in one of my streams. I have some ideas, but I'd love to hear what you guys think. Anyways, ciao!